Hello, my wonderful friends. I hope you're all having a lovely day today, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge, where many of you come to get your dose of revenge satisfaction. My friends, in this episode, you're going to hear 3 revenge stories. The first is how OP's involved in getting revenge on a crappy coworker who thinks she's invincible. The second story, OP gets fired from a corporate job and brings in better lawyers than they have. And we'll finish up with a story about a mother who won't stop gossiping. Who knows one of those? My friends, I hope you stay for the stories today, and do hit that subscribe button for future revenge stories. Let's dive in. So years ago, one of my best friends, we'll call her Kate, was working for a business-to-business tech corporation on the West Coast. Kate had a coworker in the same department as her named Angela. There are too many things for me to list that Angela did wrong, but here's a few notable examples. Angela would show up without fail 15 minutes late to every shift. Angela had been passed around 3 departments due to not being a good fit in the other ones. Angela would spend her entire shift on social media on her phone. Angela would regularly give people incorrect information on the phone. Angela would regularly paint her toenails while working. One of Angela's duties was to reply to an email inbox from contractors looking to renew warranties on their products. At one time, this inbox had over 670 unread emails in it, all of them from potential paying customers. Angela once had phone sex with her boyfriend while she was working overtime. Angela would flirt with every single man who worked for the company. And Angela was also not very attractive, and many of these men would complain to HR. Angela was seen on multiple occasions making out with employees in the parking lot. Angela would also skip out on doing work all week, causing her to need to stay and collect overtime pay, wherein she would continue to skip out on doing her work. Kate finally ratted on her after the little phone hookup, which led to a meeting between Angela, the HR director, Kate's supervisor Kim, and the department VP. Angela was not fired, but was pressured to resign and declined. Their direct supervisor Kim was onto Angela's game though, and would watch her much more closely. So in the following months, Angela vowed revenge, and spent weeks trying to figure out who it was that ratted her out. Angela was a large, tall woman who was physically intimidating, and somehow bullied one of the coworkers into revealing that Kate was the snitch. Angela spent the next week making Kate's life living hell, verbally harassing her and being overall nasty whenever she saw Kate. She also gossiped and started rumors behind her back. It reached a breaking point when Angela shoved Kate while passing her in the hallway one day. HR was notified, and once again, Angela somehow made it off scot-free. Knowing that Angela was somehow invincible to HR, many of Kate's coworkers began ostracizing Kate, fearing that Angela would target them as well, and nobody would corroborate Kate's reports of Angela starting rumors or harassing her. Kate quickly went from loving her job to hating it, and became depressed during this time. It was at this time that I decided that I would get revenge. Angela had won pretty handily. Knowing that Kim had no teeth because HR wouldn't touch her, Angela went back to not doing any work. She even got engaged and bragged to everyone at the office about her extravagant destination wedding plans. About a month later, Kate unexpectedly received a text from one of her coworkers. It was a screenshot of the text message conversation with the department VP. The VP had revealed that he had been sleeping with Angela, and this message had made its way around the gossip mill back to Kate. Her invincibility to HR suddenly made a lot more sense. I knew I was eventually going to expose her affair to her fiancé, but decided to wait on it. The day of reckoning comes about 2 weeks before the big wedding day, and on Friday after work, I make a throwaway Facebook account and send all of the proof I have to her fiancé. He doesn't reply, but I can see that he's seen it at 6 p.m. The wedding plans were cancelled on Facebook that Sunday. Monday rolls around, and Angela comes in about 15 minutes late and immediately demands to speak to HR. A 4-way meeting takes place between Angela, Kim, the HR director, and the department VP, the one she's sleeping with. 10 minutes go by, and Kim and the HR director both leave. 5 minutes later, Angela leaves the office, followed shortly by the department VP. They both return to their own workspaces. Angela begins working, and 15 minutes later, the department VP arrives with Kim and security and tells Angela to pack her things up and turn in her badge. Angela is then escorted out of the building, and she protested to the VP. The entire way out, he only said 2 words to her: "You're replaceable." I did not find out how this happened until months later, but Kim eventually revealed what transpired to Kate. Angela had racked up tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt paying for her wedding, and now that her engagement was off, she tried to use her affair with the department VP to blackmail her way into a pay raise. She had told them that she had received offers from other companies that would pay her much more, which was a lie, and that she'd leave if they didn't give her a significant raise. When Kim and the HR director left the room, the department VP told Angela that if they got it in writing that she would quit and give her 2-week notice, that he could convince them to give her a raise. He also reassured her that she could take it back during her 2 weeks notice and maintain her position. Angela took the bait, and the VP immediately took this formal in-writing notice of resignation to HR and Kim. Rather than having her complete her 2 weeks notice, they decided that it wouldn't be necessary, so she could leave that very day. Somebody tell me, how the heck she thought it was a good idea to sign a formal resignation letter after blackmailing the VP for a raise? He totally saw her as a threat to his job and eliminated her. Not only was Angela sleazy and lazy, but she seems so gullible and kind of dumb. This happened to me about 20 years ago while in college. I got a job basically office sitting on weekends. I showed up at 8 AM, and every hour I checked over things, handled the occasional phone call, and then left when the 4 PM person arrived. Most of the time, I would read, watch TV, or play games on my laptop. I probably worked no more than 10 minutes of every hour, unless something went wrong. It went on like this for years. The pay was decent, holidays were double pay, and I even had opportunities to cover weekday shifts when others were sick. One day, while I was covering the midday shift, my boss asked me to come into his office. He told me that the evening weekday position was going to become available that night. He offered me the position, which I accepted. I was told to punch out and return at 5 PM that night. The reason it went down like this should be obvious. Things went okay for a while. I showed up at 4 PM, did the normal things, and then left at 12 AM when my relief arrived. It was a little more work. There were much more calls at night. Then after 9 months, things started to go south. The daytime person developed a huge attitude problem and went from a nice person to a total Karen. She would complain about everything I did. For example, one time, a system jammed up at a remote site and she called them. 5 hours later, I saw that the jam was still there, so I called that site again to see if they were still working on it or if something else was wrong. I wanted to help solve this problem right away because the woman on our end, who would be the one to help them, was leaving soon. They did have a problem, and so I hooked them up. My reward for making sure the problem got solved and to not have to bother an upper-level employee at home on a Friday was I got yelled at because Karen complained that I had apparently ignored her log entry about the issue. My defense was ignored. The boss had me highlight important things on the log to verify that I read them. Things plodded on for a while with this new normal. I tiptoed around Karen when needed, thankful for the fact that I only had to deal with her for no more than 5 minutes. I did the stupid highlighting thing, and my log entries started getting more and more detailed, even referencing Karen's calls when I had to follow up on an issue that crossed shifts. The following summer, just after I crossed the 1-year mark, I went on vacation to visit some friends out of state. When I got back after about a week, my boss came down after everyone had left and had me describe how I did a certain task which involved certain updates. I explained to him how I did it and so forth. He then told me that I had not been doing it at all and that he was firing me. I had transposed the date code of the English file for the French file, which was the previous one. The newest one had already been applied anyways, so nothing was wrong. It was just a reason to get rid of me. So I left the office. My state is an at-will employment state, which means that I can quit at any time for any reason, and my employer can terminate me at any time for any reason. The only exceptions were state and federal laws, such as race, religion, etc. And I thought I was screwed, so I just began applying everywhere I could. During my job search, I happened to accidentally stumble upon a link about employment law. Out of curiosity, I read it and discovered that my employer had shot themselves in the foot. In the employee handbook, there was a job security clause. What this stated was that they would never lay us off and such if our jobs were eliminated. We would simply be retrained and sent to fill an opening elsewhere in the company. It sounds good, but it resulted in them cooking up reasons to fire people to get around it. But their fancy high-priced lawyers had missed something. In my state's laws, the ones passed by legislature, I was screwed because of, quote, at will. What they neglected was case law, the ones determined by the courts. The website cited a case which had ruled that a job security clause had waived at will on the employer's side, thus turning it into a just cause relationship. This means that they had to have a real reason to fire me, which they didn't. With that in hand, I sought out a lawyer. After my consultation with her, I set about collecting my evidence. My former boss did not realize that I knew more about this program than he did, seeing as I ran the same software on my own computer and laptop. I experimented. The date of the file, which they tried to use against me, is baked into the version too. I was able to demonstrate to my lawyer that if I applied the same update over and over, which my former employer stated would change the date every day, would, in reality, display the date of the file. I showed this by backdating my own copy by a year, using the update archive available from the vendor. Next, I show her how the task used to be automated. A script would snag the file and process it every day on its own. A change on the vendor site broke the script. It was an easy fix, but no one had bothered to do it because the guy who wrote it had retired. The fix involved deleting 3 characters on one line in the script. The task was also marked as only being a weekday task. In my firing, I was told how important this update was and so forth. If it was so important, why was it not done on weekends or the holidays? The vendor pushed out updates on these days too, as I showed my lawyer the one from Christmas morning. And why had the automation not been fixed? With all that in hand, she contacted them. After presenting them with the law they broke and the evidence I collected, they were forced to settle with me. So in the end, their fancy high-priced lawyers did not do their homework. I did. Thank you wonderful librarians I've known in my life who taught me my information literacy skills. They paid dividends in this case. Obviously the terms of the settlement are confidential. It was a good portion of my salary though. I did also get unemployment during this time as well. I never found out how the reaction went down, as the main office that would have dealt with it was in another state, and I never had any contact with those people. Karen's fate was sealed about a year later. I saw a Facebook post by a former coworker mentioning that his job with them had ended, so I asked for details. The company experienced a huge loss in revenue, and as a result, Karen lost her job as the site I worked in was closed. Of about the 50 of us that worked in that office, only 10 or so were moved to another location. If I was a 20-year-old and was fired, I don't think I would have had the guts to hire a lawyer and go at them like OP did, so bravo, sir. I would have just cut my losses. But the only thing I found a little suspect about this story is how OP mentioned that this happened over 20 years ago, and then he said something about a Facebook status. My mom had a fairly consistent habit of gossiping and sharing quite personal information around. We knew she was doing it, but she would adamantly deny having ever done such a thing. I wish I could remember what she did that finally made me snap. It can't even be that important. It was just the millionth time. And for once, I wanted her to admit what she'd done and know that we knew too. So we set up the sting. My friend Jane and I approached my mom and told her that Jane was pregnant, that Jane wasn't ready to tell her mom yet. We told my mom that she was really worried what people would think about her having a baby so young. She did not want anybody to know yet, so it had to be top secret. Having set the trap, I figured within a few weeks or so, I would have some evidence we could use, but I was so wrong. The very next day, my sister, grandma, and neighbor all asked me how my young pregnant friend was doing. When I was asked by the lady who worked at the supermarket the same day, I figured this had gone far enough and went home to confront my mom, only to have my dad ask how Jane was doing. I confronted my mom right there in front of my dad, which is when she started with the usual, "I would never do that. They must have heard it from someone else" routine. I explained very shortly and clearly that we had fed her a lie to see how far it would spread, and the reaction was glorious. My mom's mouth fell open, and she had nothing to say at all. My dad, on the other hand, fell back on the sofa roaring with laughter, bemoaning the fact that he hadn't thought of this years ago. It was a moment I'll treasure forever, and the point was thoroughly made. Now that my mom was aware of what happened, I was able to satisfy all further inquiries towards my friend's health with the true story, and my mom's audience for any further gossip was somewhat reduced. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /ProRevenge. Guys, if you missed the last episode of ProRevenge, a mom gets really creative on her revenge on her kids, and it's a pretty controversial story that got a lot of mixed opinions. I'm gonna link the story right here if you haven't seen it, so check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one.